uh, they put a hell lot of investment on that for years, and they built coalition, first and foremost Shiite coalition, and later on coalition with those who hate Israel enough to cooperate with Iran, and they did it successfully. First and foremost, Shiite in Lebanon, namely Hezbollah, Shiite in southern Iraq, which is my majority in Iraq, Shia and Assad, who is infidel according to the Iranians in Syria, and recently they started to have the Houthis in Yemen. So they surrounded Israel from all, and of course Hamas, who is a Sunni faction who hates Israel enough in order to state in its covenant of the Hamas that Israel should be recognized, shouldn't have any negotiation, but should be destroyed, and Islamic Jihad in Gaza too. So actually, they building for years the possibility to destroy Israel. And while Israel is busy dealing with missiles from Lebanon and from Gaza, from the Hamas, Iran is building its nuclear ability with a lot of patience, with a lot of consistency, in order to be ready to the day that they will come to destroy Israel. But it's not just a coincidence that in Iran's strategy, Israel is a small Satan and America is a big Satan. Now, it's not a secret that Iran stated by its leaders many times that the time to destroy, not to fight, not to get rid of, to destroy the state of Israel, it's all the time on the table. Now, that I let me give a personal note. My mother was a survivor from Auschwitz, Holocaust survivor. Now, I grew up in a house that the Holocaust was very present in the house, although I was born in Israel and raised up here. But many people in Israel are sons and daughters of Holocaust survivors. And when a country says time and again, we're going to destroy you after the Holocaust, maybe from students in Colombia, it doesn't mean anything. But to me and my generation, it means a lot. That means even if they're not mean to destroy, once they say, repeat it time and again, for me, it's very dangerous. And they supplying weapons and money and knowledge to the Hamas and Hezbollah and Assad many years, from 79, and recently Russia, 2016, let's say, Russia joined in, and recently China. Now, it became a big story when all of a sudden Hezbollah started to attack. You know, yesterday we have almost 100 missiles on Israel because they supporting their friends, brothers in Gaza. We didn't start any war with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is the biggest, the richest terrorist organization in the world that acting against us, and they have abilities like an army. When they sending every day missiles on us, burning, killing people, citizens, burning fields and so on, and people 9 months not in their house, 80,000 people because they're afraid to be hurt from the missiles of Hezbollah. That's a war. You can call it attrition war. You can call it threat on Israel, but we're living it every day. So we live the Hamas every day. We live the Hezbollah every day. We live the activity from Syria every day. We have the Houthis launching missile on Eilat and other places in Israel every day. So what they plan, what they call I would say, multi actors war, it's happening right now. Now, in order to be sure that they're doing well, they preparing the world to the new axes that have been built now in the world, according to what I said about identities and borders. Now we are Russians, in order to consist their presence in the Mediterranean and recently moving also to the Red Sea, they had a contract now with Sudan that Sudan will let them bring their navy to Port Sudan to be there close to the events, while Wagner started few years, Wagner militia moving from through Sudan to Chad, to Libya, to Niger, all the way to Mali, down to Burkina Faso, and they cooperating with cap d'états of generals in all these recently in Niger and in Chad, kicking out the French from there, kicking out, they fighting the Americans there, and they saying to Americans and to Europeans, we are in, you are out. Now they paving the way from Africa to the Red Sea to be involved in any developments that will happen together with the Houthis, together with Iran, Iran itself giving with its ships intelligence to the Houthis and also attacked Iran by itself, Indian ship, and also they attacked Pakistan, a nuclear country. They attacked Pakistan during this war, and they don't have any border with Israel, but they sent to us a gift of 350 missiles on Israel without any provocation from Israel, while they actually running this war for many years. And people tend to be concentrated only on the nuclear issue, but the nuclear actually enables them to run conventional war against us for many years. Now, Hezbollah, it's an army. It's much more dangerous than the Hamas. They can destroy part of Israel with their ability. That's not a joke. Now, when President Biden said, that's it, you're not doing it, they did. They did. When the Houthis go on and endangering the shipping of the world, nobody can stop them. And they get the support of these new accesses going, which actually it's Hamas against Israel, Hezbollah against Israel, Houthis against Israel, and Iran against Israel. But it's China, Iran, Russia, North Korea. North Korea took part on building of the tunnels of Hezbollah. And recently we found a lot of ammunition and weapons in Gaza from North Korea. So they're all involved in this story. Now, China never was a supporter of the state of Israel from 1948, but never, ever had a position that said that they are justifying the Hamas and using their social media in China in the manner of anti-Semitism that we all know from campuses in Europe and the US. That's a new development. So that means that they are preparing to the next stage of who will run the world, whether it will be US in the hegemony or China, Russia, and Iran. That the fact that Iran and Ukraine are moving, Iran and Russia are moving technologies, and Iran is supplying to Russia ammunition and weapons, that's interesting for itself. So we actually, whenever we supposed to go, and besides the US that's supporting us with and we are really, really appreciated, no other country in the world dare to stand and say, okay, of course, we have the support of Germany, and we have the support of some countries like Czech and other, but even France have some kind of, before the election, taking part right now, are, they are vague about their support, and they are based on the vote of immigration from the Middle East in the last decade that became very, very influential in Europe. Let's come back to us. and try to sum up the story from the micro angle from our point of view. We are having difficulties in any step that we're doing in that war, and people change the equation. Instead of they ignoring the terrible behavior of this Nazi organization called Hamas, and they said, no, no, it's not true. We are lying, and we are the human rights butchers, not the Hamas. Now, every single deed that we have in Gaza, and we, believe me, we are keeping humanitarian behavior more than any country in the world, in Gaza and elsewhere, and still we are blamed and came back and was brought to the Hague court and so on, and still we attacked every day from the north and the northeast as well, not only from Gaza, and we still bind to what President Biden asked us not to react, but rather to retaliate. It cost us a big price. 9 months, people out of their houses, and the people are destroying, burned every day. And Hezbollah is targeting to destroy houses in the north, in the Galilee. They're doing every day against UN Resolution 1701 from 2006. Nobody cares. I didn't see the Secretary General of the UN saying a word about the brutal violation of Lebanon and Hezbollah of what's going on. So, to sum up at that moment, we don't know what will be the next step. We have hostages with the Hamas, which makes our life pretty difficult and bring us a lot of limitations. But from Iran, first and foremost, that already launched missiles on us in this war, from Hezbollah in Lebanon, from Syria, and from the Houthis is there besides the war, in addition to the war in Gaza. And we need to see how we build, I assume, together with the US, together with the Arab Sunni countries such as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Jordan, and others, to keep this very important alliance between those people who all afraid from the abilities of Iran. Now I think the world start to understand that Iran is not a joke, like they used to blame us during the year, but it's real threat to the world, not only to us. And we need to find the right way to proceed. We are in a war that we didn't face from 1948. That means it's a war on our existence. It's not less than that. And we need to keep by all means our democracy, which is extremely important. We won't lose our system, our soul of being democratic. It's very important to us. And still, we need to do everything in order to survive. And now we do a picture which is wider, try to implement the situation and see how we are integrated in the world, or as it's happened many times in the past, we are the frontier of the Western world against radical Islam. Radical Islam is Iran, and also the jihadic organization, whether they are Shiites or Sunnis, doesn't matter, which are endangering the world. Now, when people stated about nationality that, as one of the scholars said, imagine communities, and he said, you might live as a Muslim in Brussels or in London, but you still identify with ISIS in the Middle East. It's a matter of problematic identity. Or somebody who's serving in the American army and all of a sudden coming to base and killing our own fellows soldiers in the bases, you ask yourself, what is his identity? He is more Muslim than American, or that issue and question that should be asked for the time to come, because the patterns in the world have already changing. The whole story is changing. The learning is changing. The AI is shaping our consciousness. The way of communication now, that people are not coming too deep at all, but see some kind of a slogan, and that's enough for them, even students and professors, university professors, as you know from your own experience. So we need to be cool, to use our, let's say, wisdom, not to get too excited according to the consequences of the situation, and looking ahead with hope, and I hope in a smart way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Koren. There's so much to unpack. You started out with the non-aligned movement in the 1950s. You spoke about October 7th, the Hamas terrorist organization killing over 1,200 Israelis and taking hostages. You spoke about Iran, the Camp David Accords in 1978, but then the Ayatollah coming in 1979, and the Shia movement to destroy Israel. There's so much to unpack, and we will start this discussion with Dr. Mansourov. And over to you, Dr. Mansourov.
Thank you, Ambassador, and greetings, Your Excellency. Thank you very much for your outstanding presentation. Really gave us a lot of food for thought. Let me kind of reiterate a couple of points which I think you were trying to make, and then ask you a big question. First of all, I agree with you that Francis Fukuyama was wrong. We do not see the end of history. History has not ended. If anything, what we see is the backlash against globalization. I mean, countries are building walls. Now the world is being segmented into economic blocks, military blocks. We see the resurgence of national identities, the renaissance of nationalisms around the world, starting from Make America Great Again to Make Russia Great Again, Make Hungary great again, make, you know, any number of countries great, make great again movements, usually led by the right-leaning political forces. And then we see a backlash against that from the left, as well as demonstrated by the results of elections in France, Great Britain, and other countries. Also, I really liked your reference to something which you called glocalization. Right. When a local event often has unimaginable global reverberations, global consequences, like that October 7th attack. I mean, this is not something new. Back in 1914, as you know, a shot in Sarajevo by Gavrilo Princip right. You know, led to the outbreak of a 4-year bloody conflict between all great powers of the time. We know it as the World War I, which cost 10 million people around the world. So just like today, I mean, we live in that similar type of situation when a local event can have unimaginable global consequences. And so now let me ask you one big question. I mean, we talked about the Middle East, and of course, I'm not an expert on the Middle East, and I'm a dilettante, if you wish, looking from the outside in. But I noticed that there was one big elephant in the room, which you didn't mention in your presentation, and that is the presidential elections in Iran on July 5th, which resulted in the election of a new president who is, again, I'm not an expert, I don't know, but at least from what I read is he's portrayed as a moderate, as a reformist.
Aggressive.
Again, I'm not an expert, I'm just reading the headlines here. Clearly, he was allowed to run in this election by the supreme leader, who obviously was aware of his views. And again, from what we read is that the new elected president talks about quote unquote multi-vector diplomacy. He hopes to reach out to the West to improve relations, not only with traditional partners of Iran like Russia and China, but also with Europe, the United States, who knows, maybe even Israel. So again, I know nothing about it other than the headlines. So you are the expert here. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about the impact of those elections. Should we dismiss them offhand? Like the State Department said, they were neither free nor fair. Or should we take seriously what's happening in that country? And what are the implications of that on relations with your country, possibly with the United States? Again, keeping in mind that we might have an earthquake presidential elections here as well come November, and we know the views of the Republican candidate, they're not really aligned with Iran that much. And again, because I come from Northeast Asia, my interest is the Korean Peninsula. So I'll be curious about your take on Iranian-North Korean relationship. I mean, under the new leadership, whether Tehran will still be interested in strengthening ties with Pyongyang, or in order to reach out to the West, to Europe, to the United States, they might actually scale down and curtail the suspected missile cooperation, maybe nuclear cooperation. Who knows what's in the pipeline there? As you said, there are so many pipelines linking those two countries. So again, what's your take on that election, implications on Iran's relations with your country, with the United States, on Iran's nuclear program, nuclear file, and of course, relations with North Korea?
Okay, you are the expert for the Koreas. My expertise, my PhD is about Sudan, not about Iran. I know I'm reading the information like you, and not necessarily the intelligent information. So I can assume as you where it might leading to, but I'm not a focused expert to Iran, and of course I'm not a prophet, as we know. So I can assume humbly, and as much as I didn't refer to the elections in Britain this week, and so I simply jumped on the election because I thought that due to the description of the process, I won't go into deep details while I'm talking. But you bringing it to me, it's important, because Iran, I know that people used to debate about whether Iran is rational. I remember those stories, and I always said yes, Iran is very rational. To my mind, very sophisticated. There are some areas that they are leading in the world of technology as well. So I wouldn't underestimate Iranian ability. I never ever said that. So, and they are very determined to their target, which is, maybe we have to say, in order to make it clear, the idea in Islam from 7th century is that Islam should return to the basic situation that they consisted then in 7th century, that the world should be what they call Dar al-Islam, that one day, which is not fixed when, one day the Islam will rule the world. Now, at the moment does mean not necessarily 7th century or now. At one point at the time, they should rule the world, namely, they have Khalifat Rasulullah, the guy who will lead the Islam, and in the meantime, they have Dar al-Harb. Those parts of the world, they are not Islamic yet, and we have to fight for them to make it Islamic. And when we come back to the Muslim empire that stopped, as you know, in 1918, when the Sultan had to leave, and 1924, when the Khalifat Rasulullah had to leave by a Muslim leader from Turkey then, Mustafa Kemal or Ataturk. Ever since 1924, there's no Islamic empire anymore. And one of the main principles of Islam, radical Islam today, is to go back and bring Islam to be an empire that will lead the world. And they don't want nation state at all. Those local leaders in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, elsewhere, they are local people who are not truly Muslim, and they're supposed to remove, and these areas are supposed to be an Islamic world. And Iran is leading this idea very, very bluntly, and they have fight within Islam against the Sunnis, who will be the leader of future Islam. And for that, they're building the whole story, including the nuclear, including the technological one, in order to gain power and to come to this target. And on the way, to get rid of Israel, to put US in its place according to their point of view. So they're very determined to this story from Khomeini time. Now, whenever they're saying a moderate president, like it used to be in the time of Khatami or some others, and people, wow, they said, wow, what a wonderful, but the biggest steps for nuclear ability was under those presidents, because they showed a very nice faces to the West, like this president who studied medicine in the US. He speaks fluent English, he knows the West, and it's very good to the leader to put him on front rather to fight again with Jalili, whom we know that he's very radical, and he was part of the time in charge on the nuclear Iranian nuclear industry, and he showed a nice face. And let's go back to agreements now, in brackets, in Iranians conditions, not in U.S. conditions. And in the meantime, they will go ahead and proceed, and they make it. Even Saba said recently that they make it a very, very intensive recently, and then they will earn time, and we'll see. So I don't believe that they will change their main idea. They tyrants to their own people. They really unbelievable things that they're doing to their citizens, and the citizens are demonstrating, and they go on. They're ignoring. People are poor. People in a country that export so much fuel and oil, people standing on gas stations to get fuel to their cars, and they don't have enough. So they don't really care about the citizens. They have a target, and they do it. So I myself think that they will show now nice faces to the world. After President Biden say to them, don't, and they still did, they will try to show, no, now we are changing our path of behavior. We are nice people. You see, the Zionists are the problem, not us. And they will do anything to make a nice image, like Qatar doing very successfully in the last 3 decades. And the West is buying this bullshit, that Qatar is a nice country. Qatar is a terrorist country, support terrorism, and financing only second after Iran, the Islamic terrorism, radical terrorism in the world. But still they have the image. So Iranians start also to work on their image as well. So it depends on regional, it depends on response of the West to what's going on now in the Red Sea, in Gaza, in the Red Sea, in the Indian Ocean, in Taiwan, in Philippines now with the Chinese all the time. And to add to that, what I said before about Africa, the China controlling Africa in the last 3.5 decades. And recently, Russia is very deep on Africa and very efficiently there. You cannot ignore it. And when you are looking as a superpower, Israel is only a local power in the Middle East, but the US and China, in a way, Russia too, pictures themselves as superpowers, and they getting hold position in Africa, in the Red Sea, in the Indian Ocean, in the Middle East, in order to promote this axis. So, unfortunately, this axis is not Democrat. This axis don't care about human rights, and they're using what Stalin used to call, and you know it probably, useful idiots in the West that serving Russian interests and demonstrating for Hamas, for example, and so on. And they're using it for their own targets. And by the way, they're doing very well, I must say. And so,
Ambassador Koren, thank you for your response to Alexander's excellent questions. Let me posit a few things and then ask you 1 or 2 questions, Ambassador Koren. So you spoke of the axis of authoritarian states, certainly the Russian Federation, the People's Republic of China, Iran, and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, right, the North Koreans. So when you look at it over you mentioned the last 3-4 decades, China obviously has focused on Africa since the 1950s. There's no question about that. And now with their Belt and Road Initiative, they've been reaching out to looking at themselves as a global power. There's no question about that. And with Xi Jinping, et cetera. But I have always noted that China has always sought a good relationship with Israel. I just never saw China as trying to make Israel an enemy. In fact, reaching out to Israel to some extent. Now, I may have that wrong, but that was sort of my sense. But I understand what you're saying now with October 7th and with the axis of authoritarian states and how that's moving in that direction. But indeed, Iran, and I think you've been so articulate on Iran and the Shia movement and how Iran is looking for the destruction of Israel as a sovereign state and how important that is. And with their proxies, you mentioned Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, et cetera. There's no question about that. You alluded also to Iran's nuclear aspirations. You mentioned their former negotiator who was running and obviously didn't succeed in the elections for president of Iran. So let me ask you 1 or 2 questions on this. One question would be Iran. They're enriching uranium at the 66% purity level. That is significant. This is the IAEA saying that. So, I mean, they're really a threshold nuclear weapon state, and they're moving in that direction. And Alexander, you mentioned the former President Donald Trump, and we pulled out of the JCPOA for the reasons that former President Donald Trump spoke about. Iranian was a threshold nuclear state, aspiring to nuclear weapons, et cetera. It wasn't transformational. They were looking for getting that. So one question I have for you is, do you see Iran pursuing nuclear weapons? And indeed, at what point would countries like Israel have to say they're too close to becoming a nuclear weapon state, and we need to do something to deny them access to become, if you will, a nuclear weapon state? That's question number one. Question number two is, you mentioned China, and you mentioned also Saudi Arabia, where China was their foreign minister, Wang Yi, was very instrumental in bringing Saudi Arabia and Iran together to normalize a relationship there. And that dynamic, China has been forward leaning on the war in Ukraine, trying to putting out a peace, a proposal, et cetera, looking to sort of moderate that to get some sort of a peaceful resolution to that. So you can see China sort of trying to sort of moderate some of the behavior we see, the bad behavior we see out there. And the same thing with North Korea, although China is certainly aligned with the Russian Federation, with supporting the Russian Federation. No more sanctions on North Korea for if you will, violating UN Security Council resolutions with nuclear tests, missile launches, et cetera. But trying to moderate that. So do you see, one of the second question I have for you is, do you see China possibly facilitating some sort of a resolution with the situation that's going on? You mentioned the Houthis in Lebanon, certainly Hamas in Gaza. Do you see China trying to be a little more, or should there be more pressure on China to be more moderate to try to find a peaceful resolution to some of these issues there? Or do you see them really fully aligned with the axis of authoritarian states, the Russian Federation, China, Iran, and North Korea? This is inseparable. This is where they're going. What do you see China to be doing in the future? And could China be used, or if you will, would China be willing to try to facilitate some sort of a resolution to some of these issues that we see going on in their own interest? Because they want a good relationship in the Middle East. They need the oil that's coming out from the Middle East. They want to, I believe also, they want a good relationship with Israel and others. So what are the prospects for using China to try to resolve some of these issues that we see on the table?
Ambassador DeTrani, it's a very good question. It's a very good summary of the situation. I'm sure that from your experience as a diplomat, you know that the main principle number one at the Chinese foreign policy is called harmony, that they're calling for harmony in the world. For years, they claimed that they consistent their policy on economy because they have to feed 1.5 billion people, and that is their main interest, which I believe it's true. But when I said before, something has been changing recently in the international relations. If China during the 90s moved to be economy of customers, we changed the whole nature of China and depend more in the U.S., in the cash of the U.S., the relationship with the U.S., and so on. They, as I said, they never supported us. They used to go with the unalignment bloc for years, and then with the Arab bloc from 48. But from the mid-80s, China and India consistent relationship with Israel, and we had pretty good relationship because of their necessity. They need technology from us. They need all kinds of agricultural products from us and processes, and they were very nice. But they never was voted or in the UN or elsewhere for us. They were under the table, they were very supportive. But in October the 7th, they stated their policy for the first time against us with Hamas. They're enabling, and China is not the US. They're controlling everything. It's not a democracy, as we can assume, including TikTok and everything. And they enable their own Chinese people using these anti-Semite messages in their own social network. It never happened before. That means that in certain points they change policy. Now, as I said before, we are only a regional actor, regional power. We are not a superpower. We cannot, regarding to Iran, we cannot go to any kind of activity against Iran without the US. Nobody even think about it. At least we need to consult with you to take your wisdom, to take your experience. We cannot jump out and endanger the entire world because they're endangering us. We have to be all the time ready and alerted, and together with you to consult on every single step that we're doing. So the fact that North Korea was the one who started with the nuclear technology to Iran, we know. The very fact that Putin is having his own economical interest and his own interest in the opposite to Gorbachev. That's why he was surprised, I think, from the Russian army in Ukraine. He expected for more and so on, but he has his own targets and he would go as long as it's serving him. Now, when North Korea and Dr. Mansourov, you know better than me that recently they sent to South Korea garbage as a protest and something. And we know the relationship between North Korea and South Korea. And we know that North Korea can stand without China, with China's support. So China can soften decision. China can do, but also, and you are better expert than me, when you speak about the road and the belt 2030 of China, that recently it's not extremely successful, especially in Central Asia and mostly in the poles, to come around up from north to Europe, from Anchorage and so on, to control ports in Europe and so on. So China is facing some difficulties too. Now, I know that China are not putting all the eggs in one basket. They have to take care about their own people. But when it comes to identify a critical moment in the world, or according to what they interpret as a weakness of the US, here they have the opportunity to provoke in Taiwan, to provoke in the Middle East, to provoke with Iran, and not necessarily to soften Iran. Now, if before 7th October you told me what your analysis about the role of China in coming with rational decision, I would accept. Now, I'm more hesitant about the story because they can see that we, the Western coalition, is not so strong, that we are hesitating, that the Houthis succeed to stop the world, the goods, the shipment from the Far East to Mediterranean to Europe, and cause to Egypt alone in the Suez Canal cutting off expense of their taxes in 50%. That's amazing. And nobody can do any, and they keep on going and threatening the world, including the US. You know, we'll attack you, we'll do. That's a different story now. Now, sometimes proxies are losing control and going against their own patrons. And it seems like it happens now in a way with Iran. And Iran calls them to stop, to calm down a little bit. I said, you don't tell us what to do. We decided to go on America and we'll attack America. China cannot do nothing about it. And they don't, they're trying. I know that they're trying, but we are in a situation, as you stated clearly, you see the results of the elections recently, both in France, European Union, in Britain, and in Iran. It might show that things are changing in the world, and the axis it start to shift a little bit from American hegemony, and they're waiting to the elections in Washington now, in America. So they all wait and see how developed will be. That's why it's so difficult to predict now where it's leading to. Now, of course, China would have an interest to promote their economy. And if it comes in contradiction with Iran, they will say to Iran, you have to calm down now because it's hurting us, of course. But at the minute, I don't see, and let's admit it, at the moment, they have a pretty successful movement in the Middle East. Right now, they're promoting their targets, specifically Iran, in the best way, exactly what they plan to do, and they succeed. So we need to be humble and look at the reality as it is, not as a wishful thinking, but what's going on now. So after all, we stand on the frontier, whether we like it or not, of the Western world against this situation. We have to be, in spite of globalization, in spite of the dynamics, in spite, now it will be clash of civilization, as Huntington stated. And they feel that in the West, many people, even in America, I heard that recently young people started to support bin Laden on September 11th. What kind of a thinking is that? But it happened. I remember how they supported ISIS in America. That will be the leadership of tomorrow in America. I'm very worried. I assume you too. And but that's a reality. And I need to understand that the world is changing dramatically. And unless we will be ready to educate ourselves that is the situation, we'll be stuck in the past with the old ideas that are not relevant probably anymore.
Thank you, Ambassador Koren. We only have 1 minute left, but I do want you to respond to Iran and the nuclear program. They're a threshold nuclear weapon state, enriching at the 66-point level of purity for.
Right.
So
it's extremely,
it's dangerous. So how do you see that?
It's dangerous not only to Israel, it's dangerous to the world. It must be stopped right now. Its nuclear ability is dangerous to the world, to you too, not only to us. And we need to do something about it. And since Iran is the head of a snake from 79, that moving all the dramatical events, development in the Middle East, Iran should be targeted. I'm saying it very clearly, not only nuclear, not only nuclear-wise, but also in their conventional behavior. That is a terrorist state. They blow out your embassy in Beirut in 82. They blow out with Hezbollah our embassy in Argentina in the 90s, in the Jewish center in Buenos Aires too. They are terrorist state. Really simple as that. And they need to take, and the Secretary of General of the UN made a nice ceremony from Iranian presidents that were killed. That's ridiculous that they don't understand what the reality is. We need to know where we're living.
Thank you, Ambassador Koren. There's so much we could be discussing here when you talk about the radical Islam, you talk about terrorism. There are so many pieces here. You talked about Huntington, the clash of civilizations. We can go on and on. Unfortunately, we have to stop here. I want to thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ambassador Koren, for this. And Michael, Dr. Jenkins, let me thank you and the Washington Times for permitting the Washington Brief to go on and talk about these very, very important but very sensitive issues in a very candid way. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Ambassador DeTrani, for your great moderation. And to Ambassador Koren, we learned so much today, just like when I met you recently with Mr. Hadbensvi. I'll be coming back soon, and we'll do more programs together like this. This will be very, very much right in a key position for our viewers to really think about what has to be done, And Dr. Mansourov, as always, you lead us into deeper discussions. I want to thank the Washington Times, which covers the Washington Brief, and also the Universal Peace Federation. And we are really, truly seeking dialogue and understanding and communication. And I really, really encourage all of our viewers to really help and assist in creating more forums for dialogue. Because if we get beyond any dialogue, it will go in the way that will be more destructive. And we also cannot ignore the facts. The facts are Israel is under siege. And the facts are that Iran is directly behind this siege. America wants to see peace. And in my times there in the Middle East, and especially in Israel and in Gaza, I know the people want peace. But radical elements don't want peace. They have another goal. And we learned a lot about that today. So I want to thank you all. Beautiful program. And we'll see you next month. Thank you.